Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of like pure engineered precision.
Right, yeah.
You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is. Broken or not broken. It's clean.
It's binary.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of human connection, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just, well, it's completely broken. We are looking at a landscape that is honestly really murky. So today, our mission is to decode the single most written about yet shockingly least understood human emotion of all time. We are talking about love.
And just to be clear right up front, we are not looking at romantic poetry today.
Yeah, no.
We are taking a really rigorous, evidence-based look at the biology, the psychology, and the active daily practice of human connection.
Yeah, and our guide for this journey is a fascinating 2026 book called Soul Therapy, The Architecture of Love by Magdalene Ogilvie-Browne. And, you really have to understand Magda's background to appreciate her lens on this.
Oh, her background is wild.
Yeah, it is. She grew up in the wild tropics of Colombia. She raced trucks at a time when women in her community rarely drove at all.
Right.
She was a champion swimmer who would swim far out into the open ocean just to, test her own limits. And eventually, she became a soul healer, specifically accompanying terminally ill patients in their final days.
Which is such a pivot.
It really is. She brings this incredibly rare mix of fierce physicality and deep spiritual observation to the table.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I'm looking at this book, and the first thing that strikes me is a paradox.
Yeah.
I mean, science can sequence the entire human genome, but we still struggle to define what love actually is.
Yeah.
Why does this one emotion consistently break the scientific method?
Well, it comes down to a fundamental categorization problem in psychology. Researchers usually fail to define love because they keep looking for a single classical definition with rigid boundaries.
Like a math formula or something.
Yeah.
Exactly, like defining a square as a shape with 4 equal sides. Human emotion just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So the book introduces Beverly Fair and James Russell's prototype theory, which suggests that love is what we call a fuzzy category.
A fuzzy category, meaning it doesn't have sharp borders. So how do we actually measure something that is, fuzzy?
Think of it as having a prototypical center, like the absolute clearest example. So a mother's fierce devotion to a newborn.
Right.
Everyone agrees that sits at the dead center of the category. But as you move away from that center, the edges start to blur. You have the love for a spouse, the love for a best friend, a sibling, all the way out to the love for a childhood pet.
Which is real, but different.
Very different. The danger of that fuzzy category is that two people can look each other in the eye, say, I love you, and mean two entirely different biological or psychological states. I mean, they're drawing from entirely different regions of the exact same fuzzy category.
Wow. So before we try to untangle the messy web of adult romance, we really need to look at the literal hardware of connection.
Yes, the biology.
Right. If love is a biological state, how is it actually built into the brain and the body from the very beginning?
Well, we have to go back to the cradle. The single most replicated finding in developmental psychology is attachment theory, which was pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth.
All right, the classic studies.
Exactly. They discovered that an infant's early bond with a caregiver isn't just about getting fed, which, was the previous assumption in the field. It's actually a primary biological survival system.
Right, because Ainsworth set up those famous strange situation experiments where a mother would briefly leave her baby in a room and researchers would just watch what happened when she returned.
Right, and they found that infants develop very specific patterns, secure, anxious, or avoidant, entirely based on how reliably their caregiver had responded to their distress in the past.
And researchers later proved that this isn't just like a phase you grow out of. That infant template becomes the exact blueprint for your adult romantic life.
It does.
You learn to treat your romantic partner the same way you learn to treat your early caregivers. Either as a safe haven you can trust, or as someone who might just suddenly abandon you.
But that blueprint doesn't just stay in the mind, though. It physically builds your nervous system.
What do you mean?
Well, developmental neuroscientists frame this through a concept called the allostatic load. Here is the basic mechanism. If you experience early relational adversity, say your caregivers are unreliable, distant, or unsafe,
Right.
your developing brain adapts to survive. Your body's stress response machinery is constantly activated, so it is pumping out cortisol, preparing for danger, and it never gets the signal to fully stand down.
So you're just constantly on edge.
Exactly. And over time, that constant state of high alert, literally alters your immune system and your cardiovascular health. I mean, it causes chronic inflammation that lasts for decades.
It is wild to think that the way you were held as a baby is currently impacting your immune system as an adult.
It's staggering, really.
But let's look at the brain chemistry of adult love, because this is where the picture gets really complicated. The anthropologist Helen Fisher completely changed how we view adult romance by showing that it isn't one single emotion.
Right. She identified 3 separate, distinct evolutionary brain systems that drive our relationships.
Okay.
First, you have lust, which is a really primitive craving driven by testosterone and estrogen. Its only goal is to just push you outward to find a
To
partner.
get you out of the house.
Basically, yeah.
Huh.
Then you have attraction. This is that giddy, obsessive, stay-up-all-night talking phase.
The honeymoon phase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Biologically, it's driven by a massive spike in dopamine, which gives you intense focus and energy coupled with a severe drop in serotonin.
Which, incredibly, is a chemical drop that perfectly mimics the brain state of obsessive-compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
You literally cannot stop thinking about them.
You can't. And finally, you have long-term attachment. Because you can't stay in that obsessive dopamine state forever.
Yeah.
It would completely burn you out. So the brain shifts to a system running on oxytocin and vasopressin. These chemicals create a deep sense of calm, security, and bonding just to keep a couple together long enough to raise children.
I always think of Fisher's 3 systems, like 3 different apps running in the background of your smartphone.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Sometimes they sync up perfectly. You feel lust, attraction, and deep attachment all for the exact same person, and your system runs smoothly.
Yeah.
But other times they are draining your battery in completely opposite directions, which perfectly explains the mechanism of why you can feel a deep, calm oxytocin attachment to your long-term partner, but suddenly feel an intense dopamine-driven attraction to a complete stranger at a coffee shop.
What's fascinating here is that to understand the evolutionary reason behind those overlapping drives, we also have to look at the dark side of that circuitry.
The dark side.
Yeah, the brain isn't just wired for the positive feelings of connection. It has dedicated hardware for the loss of it. The neuroscientist Jack Panksepp identified an ancient evolutionary alarm network called the panic grief system.
Okay.
It was designed to prevent mammalian infants from being separated from their mothers. Because, in the wild, an isolated infant is a dead infant.
And this is where the biology just blew my mind. When that alarm system goes off, it runs on the exact same opioid receptors in the brain that process physical pain.
It does.
Yeah.
When we say heartbreak hurts, we're not using a metaphor.
It's literal.
Exactly.
Right.
When you lose someone you love, your brain isn't just processing sadness, you are experiencing a literal physiological withdrawal symptom because your biological alarm is screaming that you have been separated from your pack. It registers as a physical emergency.
Wow. So if a mother's biology is literally tuning her brain to soothe that distress, how does a child ever learn resilience? I mean, is there a biological counterweight to that soothing depending on who is providing the love? Like, is a mother's love biologically different from a father's love?
The neuroscience actually points to them being genuinely different psychological and biological phenomena, but they are entirely complementary.
How so?
Well, brain scans of mothers looking at their own distressed infants show activation in a very specific primitive brainstem region called the periaqueductal gray.
Okay, the periaqueductal gray.
Right. This isn't just a basic emotion center. It is a deep, biologically prepared threat response system. In animals, it controls the instinct to freeze, flee, or aggressively defend young. But in human mothers, it becomes a hyper-tuned alarm system synchronized exclusively to their specific child's cry, driving them to instantly provide comfort and calm.
Okay, so that is the soothing mechanism. Where does the father's biology fit into this?
Longitudinal research found that fathers tend to build security through a completely different route, utilizing what's called sensitive and challenging interactive play.
What does that look like?
If you picture a father playfully tossing a toddler in the air or roughhousing on the carpet, they're inducing a tiny, safe amount of stress.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. While a mother's presence tends to soothe the distressed nervous system, a father's presence typically provides security by encouraging the child's nervous system to experience monitored risks, spike their heart rate, and then learn how to recover and regulate.
Wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, sure.
If we're saying a mother's love is scientifically all about soothing and a father's love is all about roughhousing and pushing a kid to take risks, aren't we just putting a lab coat on old 1950s gender stereotypes?
I mean, it is a totally fair critique. But digging into the underlying biology clarifies the why. It isn't about enforcing social stereotypes. It's about the fact that a developing human needs two complementary evolutionary functions. They need the foundation of absolute comfort and the push toward exploration.
Okay, that makes sense.
And to prove that this isn't just cultural conditioning, look at what happens to a father's endocrine system. The anthropologist James Rilling found that when fathers become highly involved in hands-on caregiving, the daily grind of bathing, feeding, changing diapers, they experience a measurable adaptive drop in testosterone.
Wait, really?
Yes, their body is literally reallocating its biological energy away from mating effort and pouring it directly into parenting effort. The love physically reshapes their hormonal profile.
Wow, so their bodies physically alter their own chemistry to match the depth of their commitment. That's incredible. Now, Magda's book also asks if this deep biological bonding crosses over into other species.
Right, the animal question.
Yeah. She shares this heartbreaking anecdote from her time in the Colombian countryside about two black dogs. The female dog was tragically hit by a car and killed on the road. The male dog chased the car, came back, and then completely refused to leave her body.
That's so sad.
He howled all night, wouldn't let anyone near her, and by the next morning, he was found dead beside her, with his head resting against hers. Magda calls it pure grief, indistinguishable from human grief.
And evolutionary anthropologists are increasingly backing up that observation. I mean, all mammals share the exact same oxytocin, dopamine, and vasopressin bonding network that we just discussed.
Right.
So the attachment and the agonizing separation distress of that panic grief system that the male dog felt were biologically very real. He experienced the exact same withdrawal from connection that a human does.
But there is a difference, right?
Yes. Philosophers like Roger Scruton introduce a necessary skepticism to the definition of love here. They argue that while animals absolutely feel deep physiological attachment, true love, in the fullest human sense, requires reflective self-consciousness.
Meaning what, exactly?
It requires the cognitive ability to hold a sustained narrative of your own identity and the other person's identity across time.
Okay, so the dogs felt the raw, agonizing pain of the biological alarm system, but they weren't composing a tragic internal monologue about what their future was supposed to look like together.
Exactly.
The physiological bond is shared, but the reflective narrative is what makes it uniquely human.
The human mind adds a layer of meaning and storytelling over the raw biology.
Which brings us to a massive contradiction that we have to talk about. If our human biology is so incredibly hardwired for connection, if our brains are literally bathing in oxytocin and reshaping our hormones to keep us together, why do capable, smart, loving people constantly sabotage their own relationships?
It's the big question.
And why is the modern world experiencing a literal epidemic of loneliness?
Well, let's tackle the loneliness piece first, because the public health data is staggering. Comprehensive meta-analyses like Julianne Holt-Lundsted's work show that chronic loneliness raises your mortality risk by an amount equivalent to smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day.
15 cigarettes a day? That is terrifying.
It really is. And think about that mechanism. It is that panic grief biological alarm system stuck in the on position for years, constantly flooding the body with inflammatory stress hormones.
It's burning the system down.
Yeah. The U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy has warned that what keeps this epidemic so quiet is shame. People wrongly believe their loneliness is a personal failure, a character flaw, which makes them withdraw even further into isolation to hide it.
And when we do finally find connection, relationship therapists point out that we are putting impossible burden on it. Esther Perel talks about how we now expect one single romantic partner to provide what an entire village used to provide.
Oh, absolutely.
We want them to be our economic co-survivor, our absolute best friend, our erotic passion, our intellectual equal, and our source of existential meaning all at once. If they fail at even one of those, the relationship fractures.
And when those fractures happen, the sabotage begins. To understand the mechanism behind this, the book turns to the Internal Family Systems Model, or IFS, developed by Richard Schwartz.
Okay, IFS.
This model proposes that the human mind isn't one unified entity, it's a family of subpersonalities, or parts, organized around a core self. When we experience early trauma or attachment wounds, certain parts take on extreme protective roles to ensure we never feel that pain again.
Right.
You have managers who proactively try to prevent vulnerability. They use perfectionism or emotional distance to keep people at a safe arm's length.
And then there are the firefighters,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. These parts reactively jump in when unbearable pain breaks through the manager's defenses. They use impulsive, destructive actions to extinguish the feeling immediately. Both are just trying to protect the deeply wounded, vulnerable younger parts of your psyche, which IFS calls exiles.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In relationship psychology, Sue Johnson talks about a concept called the protest polka,
Yeah.
where couples get trapped in this endless cycle of one person anxiously pursuing and the other coldly withdrawing.
Oh yeah, a classic dynamic.
But if we layer the IFS model over that cycle, the sabotage makes total sense. Think of a firefighter part pulling the alarm like a biological autoimmune response.
Hmm.
Sometimes the body's immune system gets confused and attacks its own healthy tissue because it misidentifies it as a foreign pathogen. That is exactly what your psyche is doing when someone picks a catastrophic, deal-breaking fight right when a healthy relationship starts getting serious. It's not because they don't care. It's a firefighter part inside their psyche pulling the fire alarm.
Mm.
True intimacy feels like a life or death threat to a wounded exile, so the firefighter blows up the relationship to escape the vulnerability.
They are torching the connection to save the internal system from what it perceives as an intolerable threat. The sabotage is actually a misguided rescue mission.
So to you listening right now, I want you to think about your own moments of self-sabotage, those times you felt that sudden burning jealousy or that overwhelming urge to just pull away, ice someone out, and run.
We all have them.
We do, and understanding the mechanics of the science changes everything. Realizing that your urge to flee is just a biological adaptation, a misguided internal protector trying to keep you safe from a perceived threat, can instantly dissolve the shame of thinking you are just bad at love. You aren't broken. You just have a very active security system that is misinterpreting the present based on the past.
Which is why resolving this requires what the book calls a deliberate practice of love. The psychoanalyst Erich Fromm argued that mature love isn't a passive feeling that washes over you like a wave. It is an active, demanding discipline.
It's work.
It is work. And this is where the world's major religious traditions actually converge with modern psychology. Whether you are looking at Christian agape, Buddhist metta, or Confucian Ren, they all define love as a practiced, selfless care for another person, independent of your own fleeting moods or biological spikes in dopamine.
If modern love is burdened by all these impossible expectations and hijacked by all our internal firefighter parts pulling alarms, how do we actually strip it back to what works? Magda's book looks to the end of life for the answer. She spent years companioning the dying, and at the threshold of death, time strips away all the performance.
It really does. The modern palliative care movement was built on the concept of total pain, coined by Cicely Saunders, which is the idea that a dying person's suffering is physical, psychological, social, and spiritual all at once.
Right.
To treat them, you can't just look at the X-ray. You have to attend to the whole person. And research from palliative care physicians, like Ira Byock, shows that at the end of life, all the exhausting complexity of human relationships boils down to 4 incredibly simple phrases.
And those are just...
Please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you.
It's beautifully simple. Magda distills this entire philosophy into a 4-pillar framework for practicing love daily. Repair, dignity, witness, and compassionate presence.
Yes.
Repair is actively saying those 4 phrases. Dignity, drawing from Harvey Max Chochinov's work, is the proven idea that a person's worth isn't just internal, it's actively conferred by how we look at them and speak to them.
Right.
Witnessing is holding space for their life story without judging it. And compassionate presence is what Zen teachers call the don't-know mind. Showing up to a person without an agenda, without trying to fix the unfixable, just being completely there. So what does this all mean? It means that whether it's an ancient religion, a hospice bedside, or a modern marriage, love is an action. It's doing the hard daily work of witnessing someone accurately.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we realize why those 4 simple phrases, please forgive me, I forgive you, thank you, and I love you, are so profoundly effective. They perfectly bypass the managers and the firefighters in our minds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. At the threshold of death, there is no more future to control. And there is no more need for protective armor. The ego's defenses simply drop, leaving only the relational truth.
I want to just pause on that because that is such an incredible insight. Saying those phrases bypasses the protectors. Imagine the next time you are in a petty argument with your partner about doing the dishes.
Something so small.
Exactly. Underneath the surface, your manager parts are putting up walls, your firefighter parts are ready to say something mean to protect your pride, and your exile is terrified of being unvalued. Imagine what happens to your body and their body if you just stop and use one of those phrases, please forgive me, or I love you,
It shifts everything.
It physically forces the defensive parts to stand down. It strips away all the noise.
It immediately lowers the allostatic load and brings both nervous systems back to a state of connection rather than threat.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive from the raw biochemistry of an infant's attachment and the pain of a broken mammalian bond through the fiercely protective autoimmune parts of our own psyche, all the way to the profound, grounding simplicity of 4 phrases whispered at the end of a life.
It is a remarkable map of the human experience, showing us that our biology and our choices are deeply intertwined.
It really is. And before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. In the book, there is a brief discussion of a fascinating psychological research methodology called the Love Life Story Interview.
Yes, Dunlop's work.
Right. Researchers ask people to simply narrate the chapters of their love lives, and then they analyze the tone of that narration. They found that securely attached people tend to tell stories of redemption, where love is costly, mistakes are made, but ultimately it is worth it, and they grow. Insecurely attached people tend to tell stories of contamination, where things might start out good, but the narrator knows they will inevitably turn bad, toxic, or ruinous. So think about the narrator inside your own head. When you tell the story of your love life, your past relationships, your heartbreaks, your family dynamics, what is the tone of that narrator? Is it a story of contamination where you are always waiting for the other shoe to drop? Or is it a story of redemption? Because the science suggests that the narrator in your head isn't just passively recounting your history, they are actively writing the biology of your future. Which story are you going to let them write today? Take care of yourselves and keep diving deep.